Welcome to
to
yet another edition
uh,
of But
but that's
That's
not
Not
important
Important right
right
now.
now. And
Why are
today we
why are
have
we so-
our bets.
why are we sounding like arthritic robots? That never happened before.
But that's not important
But
right
that's not
now.
important right now. What's that all about? Come on.
We had a good
We need
session
to
last week, wasn't it?
we had a pretty cool session. Yes.
Yeah, we had
Yes,
a good
pretty much
session
so.
last week.
Yeah.
Welcome to all of our new listeners. Welcome to those returning. Asma had a joke. She messaged us because we had Asma in the last episode, and Asma was laughing yesterday. She posted in the group chat. She's like, because we do a little introduction talk before we bring on our guest. And
Got
she's
it.
like, "Oh my God, you're settled. Be on your best behavior." So I think we were on our best behavior. I'm not too
Yeah,
sure.
we were.
I think we on listening back when I was doing the editing. Well, I don't really edit because I was like, well, you could cut things out. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't cut anything out. I rarely ever cut anything out. What I do cut out, maybe if there's a serious curse word like OF, I would probably mute that or whatever it is. But
Or
guys
coconut,
who are listening
something
know
like that.
that this is unedited. I
Yes,
clean
yes.
up the sound. I get rid of Jared's overbearing noise. um, I get rid of my noise, my stuff that I hear in the background as much as possible.
Right.
Last week I had to run outside. While you were talking, I had to run outside and tell my parents to turn on the TV because Jeopardy was coming over.
Hey, look at that. Yeah.
Um,
Who's hosting it now? Anyway, that's unimportant right now. No.
that's
Yeah.
that's important right now. So we got some good feedback from Asma from the last episode, but we
This is good.
want to shift gears today. We want to talk. We have another guest today, a very important guy, very special guy. He's been waiting for like the last hour. I don't know. He signed in a long time ago. So
I sure hope.
I'm just gonna WhatsApp him and message him and say, give us a couple of minutes and let's think. So
Yeah, let's get the ball rolling.
John, tell me what's the latest in advertising? What's new? What have you heard anything new?
You know what? It's getting to a point now where what's ahead for advertising, it's what's behind.
Yeah. Okay.
To put it another way, I'm not seeing anything. I mean, there have been brief glimmers of hope, as it were, that we can look at an ad or two, whether it's on print or listen to an ad on radio or see an ad on TV, and we can say, hey, that is not a bad piece of work. But very rarely, and maybe it's my age talking,
Mm-hmm.
I am yet to see an ad, as far as this year is concerned, that would make me sit up and take notice and go, wow.
Yeah.
Now, this is not necessarily a failure of imagination on our part, at least in our part of the world. I think it's you could argue that it's a widespread phenomenon.
Yeah.
With what's going on, because people are so into the product, and not so much into the reasons as to why people would want to buy the product in the first place.
Yeah.
And we've always got to remember that in terms of getting the message across, you've got to make the product interesting. Always make the product interesting.
Yeah.
Give people a reason to want to buy it.
Yeah.
And there was this product, in fact, that was advertised, a special face cream, and just on the power of word of mouth alone. Because remember, I told you that sometimes the best form of advertising, we don't need an ad campaign. We don't necessarily need to put something on social media, and it doesn't necessarily have to go viral. The best way to advertise, obviously, is via word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with this particular product. And it gives us a sense of pride, too, in the sense that, well, it originated in our home country. And we're very happy about that. But if people are so into a product, and if we can come up with an ad campaign that's really good, sure. I know it's not exactly related to advertising, but maybe if we can, we could detect quite a few parallels there. In that Quincy Jones, in one of his later interviews, this was like about 2 or 3 years ago, he once said, if you've got a song, let's say you're producing a song, and let's say that it's well written and everything, but you don't have the greatest singer in the world, it doesn't matter, because if you've got something that's lyrically potent and competent, but you have a singer who's kind of not exactly a really terrific singer, but he's competent, he can hold his own, or she can hold her own, that song is going to stand the test of time and it's going to work. Now, on the other hand, if you have a song that is badly written and nothing in the world can save it, nothing. You could be a terrific singer, the lyrics are practically meaningless, but if it's not that well done, if it's not that well packaged, you could have the greatest singer in the world and it's not going to work. The same thing applies to a script in a movie or anything like that. Great script.
I remember thinking you were doing a countdown on the radio once years ago. I think it was you. Or was it Emmett? Anyway.
It could have been Emmett, yeah.
I remember there was a song that charted called Debbie Gibson's Pregnant with My Elvis Baby Child.
That was right, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Mojo Dixon back in early 1990, he had a song called Debbie Gibson is Pregnant with My Two-Headed Love Child. And at first, the thing about it is Debbie wasn't too thrilled, understandably, because it didn't exactly portray Debbie in a favorable light.
No.
But I'm thinking, why of all the people in the world would you want to target poor Debbie Gibson? It's like this is 1990 we're talking about here. Debbie Gibson did not have a hit in like about what, 2 years, 2, 3, a year or two.
Yeah.
Why target her? Come on, that didn't even make sense. Anyway,
maybe he was trying to get a career back on track, but I couldn't believe it. But as you said, it was a terribly produced song. It was
terribly produced. Yes,
it was very bad.
Terribly produced.
Mm-hmm. But somehow it got charted because of the nature of, I guess, the fact that you say
it charted because of I think it charted largely because of the novelty factor. I mean, there's so many other reasons as to why a song or a movie is going to do well.
Yeah.
You could, now we didn't. Now you're a huge Star Wars fan. I think you're probably the biggest Star Wars fan there is.
Yeah.
And
you remember Dark Lord. Go follow the 8-bit Dark Lord on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Go follow the 8-bit Dark Lord, and for the time of your life, if you're really into Star Wars.
Yeah.
So please do that. And you remember, now you may not remember, but you remember the stories surrounding Star Wars, right? Because back in 1977, 20th Century Fox did not have much faith in Star Wars. Rather, they wanted to show a film set, I think, immediately after World War II. It was called The Other Side of Midnight.
Yep, Sidney Sheldon.
Sidney Sheldon wrote that.
Good book. It's a good book.
Yeah.
Good book. Yeah.
And he also created the series I Dream of Jeannie, but that's not important right now.
Yeah, he's a great writer.
Sidney Sheldon, it was figured that now the studio execs thought that Star Wars was not going to be this huge box office success because they did not know how to market it effectively. They just didn't know how to do it because what is it? George Lucas said it was a space opera. Well, okay, it's a space opera, but what the hell is it about? They had no idea. They had no idea. They had no idea.
Just as a giant walrus,
right?
Shaggy chimp.
What is this shaggy chimp doing here? They figured that a period piece set in World War II would be the better deal. And nobody's going to be interested in watching some sort of two droids ambling about in the desert looking for some guy or something like that. Yeah. That was not what they had in mind. They figured that this was going to be the movie that would really make a lot of money for Fox, for 20th Century Fox. So they started showing it, and they said, well, look, they made a deal. They said, look, you show The Other Side of Midnight, but you also have to show Star Wars.
Yeah.
And at first the cinema owners were hedging and they were humming and hawing and they were saying, no, we don't want to do that because we think Star Wars is a steaming pile of crap. No, forget it. And they said, well, no, I mean, but as it turned out, Star Wars suddenly took off.
Yeah.
And it took off because, again, there is that famous phrase again, word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because people had never seen anything like this before. And suddenly the studio execs of 20th Century Fox got religion. They said, oh my God, we messed up. Because we thought.
Well, Alan Jr. He put his he put his neck out, and he has to be credited. It's just like this girl for Star Trek. What's her name?
Lucille Ball.
Lucille Ball. They put their neck out. They believed in it. They put their neck out. Anyway, I don't want to keep our guests waiting for too long, but that kind of segues very well because we are talking about video and content and marketing and so on. And not only that, the fact that Hollywood is kind of local content for the United States that has become worldwide content. We have our own situation here locally in Trinidad where we've had a TV station which all of us have grown up with because we only had one TV station for a very long time.
For almost 30 years.
When did TV6 come in? 91, 98?
1991.
Right. So for very, very long, other than AVM, we had one TV station from 1962 right up, and that was our entertainment, and we tuned into all those things. And Jared, if you follow Jared on his page and on Twitter, Jared has a lot of stories to tell about the different shows that we grew up with watching. And one of the famous stories is about, well, of course, Sesame Street. We got Sesame Street because of this woman in TTT pushing for it. She went there and she did
her name. Her name. In fact, there are two people behind that, eh? Ann Winston. Winston and Farouk Mohammed. And Farouk Mohammed. Those two were instrumental in bringing Sesame Street to Trinidad and Tobago. Right. Because they were there at the launch of Sesame Street in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Because Jamaica was the first Caribbean country to air Sesame Street.
Mm-hmm.
And because the fact that they were there, it was Ann Winston who lobbied for Sesame Street to be aired in Trinidad and Tobago. And it didn't. I think it started airing in TNT. I think sometime just a year after Sesame Street was first came on the scene in 1969. Came to Trinidad and Tobago back in 1970. So. Right. A little bit of strength, and she believed in it.
Right. So one of the comments made by the owner of Gael is that we have the Sesame generation. We mentioned this before, and our guest that we're bringing on today was at the forefront of that in the 80s. Let me see if I could get the little bio that we wrote that he sent to us. His name is Mr. White.
Mr. Wright? His name is Mr. Wright.
Officially, his name is Thomas Ian Mora. But we all know him as Timmy. And
exactly, Timmy Mora, a legend.
Is the owner of Visual Art Production. And they have a YouTube channel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring him in now. But to all the listeners, please go and follow him please go and subscribe to him on YouTube. He's got thousands of subscribers, 11,000 subscribers as of this article that he sent us in Newsday. That's June of this year. And he's got thousands of ads that he has got from his particular library. And one of the reasons we brought him onto the show is because we were talking about an old ad in the first episode of season 2, the Quicks ad, and he put it up on his channel. So I kind of want to bring him in to talk about not just him being in the forefront of developing local, ads and so on for the ad industry, but also, preserving those ads for all of us to see, because I think it's important for us to know these things and to get back. So I'm going to bring him in. going to admit him and see if he will come in, and he will give us a little bit of an introduction to himself. Mr. Timmy Mora, are you there? Let's see if you will. He's
Let's see if he'll respond.
We've been waiting for so long. We've been rambling. Mr. Mora.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Mr. Mora. Nice to meet you.
Great to have you here with us.
Yep, great to be here.
Right, so we did a little bit of an introduction of who you were for our 4 guests. We don't have 11,000 subscribers. We have like 4. We have a hardcore following of 4. So we're building our audience. But thank you so much for coming and have a little chat with us. So I don't know if you want to kind of give yourself a little introduction. We kind of said who you were, but if you want to just kind of say, who is Timmy Mora, that would be great.
Well, hold on, let me just turn this down. Okay, Timmy Mora is a guy who was lucky enough to find what he wanted to do for his career very early on. I was about, 18? Wow. Going on 19 when I started at TDT. I was back in 1976.
Ooh.
And
I was 1 year old.
and I worked at TDT until 1981. And it was the best job I ever had. Because after TDT, I never considered myself working for anybody but myself after that, So as a job, I was the best in terms of the type of work and the people who I worked with and the whole atmosphere. There was nothing like it in Trinidad, JT was the only station. We were working, with technology that nobody else was working with. Mm-hmm. And in the time that I was there, the technology evolved. When I started there, we were working with 2-inch tape.
Wow.
So 2-inch tape, videotape, it's machines were like huge. I mean, like, what can I say? You ever seen
clunky, unmanageable, that sort of thing? Or they
they were very, very.
Reels. Wasn't that reels?
Yeah, reels. Yeah, 2-inch reels. So, like, if you think about a audio recording studio with a 78 track or whatever machine.
I remember those.
Right. So those kind of reels, and that size of machine. So it was on it. And most of the programming was live. I mean, there wasn't a lot of editing. We would do stuff in the studio, and it was all recorded. Switched and recorded live. There was much editing capability on these 2-inch machines. Mm-hmm. In fact, to edit, we had to splice. Mm-hmm. So I learned to splice videotape. Way back then. The guy who taught me to do that was a gentleman called Wellington Yen Chung. Yeah, good man. He was a studio coordinator at the time. He had just been promoted because he was an operator before. And then he became a director. And actually, one of the biggest projects I ever did was with him when we did the launch of Chandelier in 1978. Yeah. It was when Chandelier was formed, and their breakout album was called Many Lights, One Glow.
But I read in the article that you only played 1 minute of it. What happened? What was the story behind?
Oh, that was a kind of heartbreaking story because
oh my goodness.
We did the show, we promoted it. It was supposed to run at 8:00 right after Panorama a certain night. I was in master control, ran the tape. It ran, and then we had a standby generator, so we lost power for like 45 seconds. It came back on. And then we restarted the tape, but then I found out people were calling the switchboard and saying they had no electricity. So the only people who saw that live broadcast were people in Toko, I think, who had power.
Wow.
Oh my word!
So,
Oh wow!
that
That
was,
my
Wow.
goodness.
that was
That's mind blowing, though. That's
Yeah,
mind blowing.
when I read that part, I said the story behind this is it's heartbreaking, but it's also important because that is a story that is legendary now. I mean, of all things to happen in the middle of this, you always think that when you're going to launch something, and even now, modern day time, with all the technology that we have, with all the ability to do things, there's always some little. Well, there's not a root
yeah. Well, I
cause
mean,
together.
we had the technology. We had all our transmitters had generators, so we were back on. But just nobody could see us because
Nobody
they didn't
could
have
see.
power.
Yeah.
You know.
But did you rebroadcast that later? Did they?
I think it was but rebroadcast later. But I mean, I just was totally over that. I was working on something else, and so I did at TDT. I specialize in editing, which there was no kind of official position for. You're either a technical operator. Well, we were trainees when we started. When I started, they were paying us $375 a month.
Wow.
Right? I went in there with like 7. There were 8 of us. The original guys were Anthony Solandi. People might know him.
Yes, I know Anthony.
You know
very well.
Right? Yeah. Andy Smart.
Andy Smart, yes.
A guy called Paul Thompson. A guy called Mervyn Ambrose. Ashford Jackman.
Jackman, yeah.
That was a funny story. Ashford Jackman came with us, and we were hired by a guy called Brian Waller, who was the assistant program director at the time. So he hired us, and because the program director, who was Farouk Mohammed, was on vacation in Canada. So I remember he brought us all into the boardroom. We all introduced ourselves, and then he turned us over to one of the senior supervisors, a guy called Errol Harilal, who then took us down on a tour of the technical area. So these are 8 young men going into this friggin' spaceship, at the time. And the funny part of the story.
Okay. Very good description.
Ashford Jackman asked where the bathroom was and left us and went to the bathroom, and he never returned.
What do you mean he never returned? Like what?
I mean, he left the building. He just looked at that and said he can't do this.
But he did have a successful career. I mean,
he came back. He came back.
Yeah.
He came back like about
it a little bit. You had to get
3 months later. Yeah. 3 months later, and asked if he could if they would reaccept him, and for some reason they did. And Jackman turned out to be one of the best technical operators we had.
Wow.
So incredible. Sports came long after that,
Okay.
When I got there, there was, all the old programming was still going on. Ricky Tikki, right. mainly for women. And from a commercial point of view, the only commercials we did were Ad Mags, which was standards, or Huggins would bring in all these, whether it was furniture or appliances, and we'd lay them out in the studio, and we would do I think it was like 10 to 15 minutes of an announcer with a script and the cameras would just be dollering around the studio, around the item that's being talked about,
Wow.
And that was live. There was no editing. That was, it's, start and end, and that's the show.
Wow.
Yeah, that was it.
It's kind of infomercial. You just
yeah, what we call an infomercial now. But I mean, so people like when I started doing ad mags, it was Melina Scott was the presenter, and then they had Denise Gomes.
Mm-hmm.
She also did some of those, and then Allison came in, and she did all the rest of the ad mags she did. The other people had retired or
was it? Yes, was it done in a certain way to me that when they were doing it live, right? Because I can remember when I was a little kid back in the late 70s, what they did was that whenever they would announce the read the live script, they would just see this frame, and they would remove the frame, and then whatever they would say would correspond to the next frame. And that's how it was done.
But isn't that a TV card though? Wasn't that a TV card, like a still?
No. An ad mag was a live thing. It was all live pictures.
What Dad is describing sounds to be like a TV card.
It's what we call caption cards.
The caption cards, right? Because
artists used to make these, so agencies used to send caption cards. So I mean, caption cards was like the cheapest form of advertising.
Yeah, I've done my fair share.
As opposed to a video or a film or a.
So, Timmy, when did agencies start sending ads to TTP?
Well, agencies were always sending ads to TTP. It's just that the formats changed. Mm-hmm. So originally it would have been slides, 35 millimeter slides. Right. And then the caption cards, which the art rooms would have prepared and sent for us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then there would have been film, because a lot of ads were done. Most of the ads back in that 70s, early 80s periods were done on film. Right. So people like Pearl and Dean would have been doing ads on film, and we would run the ad on film because TTT had the ability to roll film. That's where all the movies were on film. Right. They came on reels, 16 millimeter film. So ads were on 16. There were 35 millimeter slides, and all of these things had different costs, So getting back to the ad mags were produced because there was the director would go through it, and we would rehearse this thing like 3 times before. We actually recorded it, yeah. So there were times when we had to go back to the presenter, who would hide the paper behind her back and talk to the camera, and then we move off again. So we would do 2 or 3 3 cameras mostly in the studio doing that. So it was all kind of synchronicity. And we had some great cameramen.
That sounds very innovative. I mean, I don't know anybody. Was that something industry that was done elsewhere, or did
I don't know. I met that system in place already.
It's interesting because, I mean, for a lot of what we were doing here, especially in your days, we're just living off the seat of your pants. Like, this works, and we do this, and it works, and it's awesome. And maybe if we tried this, and wow, that works too. Let's try that.
It was a lot of innovation, and as you say, flying by the seat of your pants. Yeah. So in TDT, you went in as a trainee, and you spent a year as a trainee. So in that time, you were put on. We had 3 crews, A, B, and C crew, and we also always had 2 crews working, 1 morning shift, 1 evening shift, and 1 off. Yeah. So that's how it worked. I was on the what crew was I on, boy? Sea Crew, I think. And but it was, and that's how you learn from the older guys. You know, they would put you on camera. You would practice. They would teach you the basics of lighting, because the operators had to do everything. I mean, you lit the set, you work the camera. They had specialist audio guys who were there much longer and had kind of earned that position. So they didn't work camera and they didn't light. You know, they were just doing audio.
Yeah.
And then you had the floor manager, call it the studio coordinator, and then they started calling it the floor manager. The first floor manager I met there was a white guy called Dennis O'Donnell, which he was O'Donnell. And then he retired. Yeah, that died or retired, and then Yen Chong was promoted. I was on the A crew. Sorry, I don't remember. So everybody did everything, including. Right. And then when we had so I said we started with 2-inch tape, and then TDT made, to my mind, one of the biggest mistakes for themselves and for the whole country, because they decided to change the format and go to 1-inch tape, which was experimental at that time. So we actually bought probably one of the first 10 1-inch machines ever built. It was built by a company called, Ampex were the ones who did the 2-inch machines as well as the 1-inch. Yeah. So 1-inch was that was like very different in terms of the way the machines worked. So it was a helical scan machine, meaning that 2-inch, it's a flat machine. So the tapes go down flat and runs through a head. So just like if you could visualize that, 2 big reels of tape going across a head, flat. 2-inch, 1-inch the machine was slanted. And the tape then went through some guys like how you thread a film projector.
Right.
And it was all air cushioned. And those machines, as I said, we were the guinea pigs, and they gave so much trouble.
Yeah.
We sent an engineer to Ampex for a month to be able to deal with, problems that we were having. Anyway, but the mistake they made was that they sold their 2-inch machines to CBC in Barbados without copying a single thing.
Oh. So we have all these 2-inch reels just sitting around in TTT.
No, well, they were sitting down for a while, and then they moved. They moved from Barbados. No, the tapes remained with us. But the tapes ended up on the patio outside the general manager's office. I mean, just in the rain. And eventually they just dumped everything in the lavas. So
that's just unconscionable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was one of the...
So all that valuable material.
Yeah, so everything that we did, we were doing stuff like Parade, which was, we did the same way. Parade, Steel Band Concert, Ricky Ticky.
Through the Eyes of Tomorrow.
Through the Eyes, yeah. All of those.
Right. So what you're saying is that most of the stuff that had been done from 60 whatever launch to around this time when we went to 2-inch tape, you'd say that so there is really just very little footage around. What we have seen.
No, there's nothing from 2-inch tape. They did not copy a single thing.
Wow, that's
that's why we can't find Sylvia Hunt at home. And we can't find
at home with Sylvia.
Oh my gosh!
It doesn't exist anymore. And I worked on all those shows. You know, that was
But this is what Jared and I were talking about in the first episode, season 1, is that why can't we find, and we just quote an ad or something, and well, I mean, in the case of shooting stuff internally in TTT, I can understand now why we don't have that stuff. But this is why I came back to whether the agency submitted stuff. Because some of the ads that we would like to see, we have not been able to find. And one of them is that Tunox ad. So we'll be like, well, where can we find this Tunox ad? This Tunox ad in the 80s. Who shot this? Where did this come from? So on.
Tunox was shot on film. That was a film commercial. But but remember, we used to get, they had agencies had clients who were importing and importing things, right? Yeah. So they would get the commercial material from abroad, already produced. So they'd get a reel of film. They didn't have to produce anything unless they were localizing a product or it was an indigenous product that they had to do something from scratch. So there was a lot of that. All the shampoos and Lux soaps and all of those foreign products were all imported. Yeah. So
I have a funny story about Lux soaps. I'll my funny story about Lux soaps that was told to me, but go on.
And the most they would do, I mean, some of it would come in Spanish, so then they'd have to replace the track. Yeah. And that's why you get a lot of these ads with the woman talking in Spanish and an English voice, and this it's like Chinese movie.
They're not exactly in sync.
It can't be in sync because she's talking Spanish and somebody is talking English.
Sorry, that sounded terrible.
In fact, I'm seeing an ad now like that. Some ad on TV right now.
It's still done because when we went to the agency, the Nestle was one of our clients.
Yeah, Nestle was a famous.
Yeah, Nestle's market is Latin America. And we're just a little English.
And they assume everybody speaks Spanish.
No, not assume. They don't pay for. They will never pay for a market to do its own ad when they have one that they can adapt. Right. So we have paid, and this just doesn't apply to TV ads or radio. We have had to adapt packaging from Malaysia. Because they say, Malaysia's market is just kind of like Trinidad. So we just take that packaging and just change the language to English or English-Spanish or whatever it is. And I've done a lot of those projects. So what I'm saying is that we being this territory, this kind of English-speaking territory dropped next to this giant Spanish-speaking territory of billions of people. It's kind of hard to rationalize. Well,
doing something for Trinidad or doing something just for the English-speaking West Indies.
The story told to me was that the agency was shooting a Lux commercial in Digger Martin. I think this was in the 80s. So I don't know if you ever heard this story. This story was told to me by the account executive in the agency at the time. And he said, I was shooting this Lux commercial with this naked lady in a bathtub. I mean, she's stark raving naked. And one of the neighbors said that this house is shooting porn. And the whole crew has to run.
Police coming.
He said, but this is not funny. This is the case of Digger Martin. We are running with big, heavy cameras to escape the police. And the police would not believe that we were not shooting. He said, we did not believe that. He said, you won't shoot these things here. Nobody shoots commercials here. What are you talking about?
I haven't heard that story before, but I can believe it.
I would like to get that story because the owner of the agency, he is it now. I would like to ask him, Jared and I could probably engage him and say, hey, come on the show.
Which agency was that, McCann?
We don't say the name of the agency.
Oh, we don't necessarily say the name of the agency.
We don't say the name of the agency, but he works for his own agency now. He owns his own agency now. So I'll probably ask him if he'd be willing to come on. I don't want to call his name because I don't know if he'll be okay with that. But coming back to which is also good because it's coming back to this idea of losing things. And we
Yeah.
were told that the archive, the Toronto Tobago archives in Port of Spain, have been trying to archive a lot of footage. And I don't know if you know that, because I was told to be able to find the Tunnock's ad, go there. So we were like, well, if Timmy doesn't know where we could get this ad, we will just go to the archives. But are you aware that they are, trying to create a library in the archives?
Yes, I'm very close to the archivist there who always calls me for advice. And
Good.
And in fact, she was a client.
Good.
She was a client before she went to Scotland and got her degree in archiving. And I knew when she was going, and then she communicated with me while she was there. She came back and she applied for the job as she's the video archivist of all video and audio material.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and well, she worked for the ILO before, and we had done quite a few projects with them all over the Caribbean, actually. And so we've stayed close, and that's one of her prime objectives, to be able to equip the National Archive with a digitizing unit, and to be able to handle any of the formats that went before.
Yeah.
So we're talking about from phonograph to tapes to videotape and all the formats, because we went through quite a lot of formats.
Yeah.
Well, at least if you be talking from the government point of view, they went from my time, from 2-inch, which forget that, to 1-inch, forget that as well, because the 1-inch tapes ended up in the same patio getting wet and went the same route. And that was a shame, because 1-inch, actually we may have had some dubbing off of 1-inch, because with 1-inch we could have edited. They had an editing capability.
Right.
And after 1-inch, we just went into like the lowest format ever, which is U-matic.
Right.
And stayed with U-matic. TDT stayed with U-matic till early 90s.
Yeah.
So that's like from 1970, probably 77, straight up until they went to News always had their own. News was shooting U-matic, but when I got there, they were shooting film. So News was done. I don't know if many people know this, but News was shot. All the panorama news in the 70s was shot on film. And they had a special team of news photographers or cameramen who went out to shoot news. And they had a special unit, and that was called Room 10. So the Room 10 guys were the film guys. And then they would go out on assignment during the day, come back in the afternoon, and take the film to our processing lab. We had a processing lab to actually process that 16mm film that was just shot this morning, make it into a positive. They would take it and edit it for the story, for the news at 7. And that film would run on the telecine projectors in the technical area by operators like myself. So, and they did that until they went to U-matic. And U-matic in those days was cumbersome and uneconomical in terms of, how much you can record on a tape.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, more than film, because film was like, 2-minute bursts max kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But U-matic was like a 20-minute tape.
Right.
But you had this big deck that you used to have, and the camera was connected to it via an umbilical cord.
Yeah.
So somewhat more stronger cameramen would put the deck on their back and the camera on their shoulder and operate. Usually they would have at least two people because you would have a sound man as well. Or sometimes the reporter did double as a sound man.
Yeah.
So then that whole system changed to become electronic and they stopped shooting film. But all of those films were there and they went the same route. See, 1-inch and 2-inch. So, I mean, that would have been a great archive because that would have been actually what was happening in the country.
So Timmy, is it that nobody really... You see, I saw the same thing with the agency. Just as a kind of parallel. When we moved the office, when we had to move out of the office, we had like these, what do you call these? I don't know if they call them sliding racks. I don't know what the technical term is. And huge racks.
Right, so you just move aside one and there's a little layer behind it and that kind of thing, right?
I remember the financial director at one time kind of making an offhand comment, and I always remember this, saying, we spent thousands of dollars on this rack, and look at the state of it. And it was just a state of confusion. People just started throwing, props and stuff. Suzanne used to throw her props in these racks. And they weren't really used for what they were for. They were for cataloging or your
media.
Right, or the media. And when we moved and we rebuilt the office or whatever, they just took all of this stuff, threw it in boxes, and God knows where they went. And the racks just ended up on the sidewalk to be thrown away. You see? And I always ask, is there no one here who is willing to sit down and they're like, no, nobody has time for this. Nobody's going to pay for this. Nobody knows what these things are, whether it needs to be kept. So I'm like, all right. And the historian in me, because my first degree is in history, just cringed at the idea of just taking all this stuff and turning it out. But you don't have any power within the company to say otherwise. I'm not going to take all of this stuff and take it home. I don't have any space home to keep this stuff. But it's just sad, But there was no TTT to champion this, you see.
We had people who certainly cared. I mean, because one of my best friends, who was one of the guys who started Video Associates, Stephen Lipau, he actually saw the tapes in the rain and told them you have to move these things, and they refused. And then like a couple of weeks later, he saw them being thrown onto the back of a truck, from the patio on TDT onto the back of a truck. It wasn't even, they didn't walk it down the steps, just threw it into the... And he just got and he actually almost lost his job because he lost it and went and cussed the program manager at the time.
I can see that, yeah.
So, yes, there were people who cared, but the management didn't understand the value.
Yeah. I think that's part of our culture too. But
it happens in everything. It happens in everything.
Us. And a friend of mine who lives in England, a friend of mine, he works for the English Civil Service. He's like, a lot of our behavior patterns come from the colonial times of, this is how English people were. English people were tended to be very lackadaisical with keeping things. Especially in the
colonies, but they were very good at keeping records.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, in the country, they wouldn't throw things away just like that. But I mean, the episodes of the BBC losing entire Doctor Who serials because they didn't know what they were. They just chucked them out and they're like, oh my God, they lost a whole. But what I'm saying is coming back to what you're doing on your YouTube channel. I think it's awesome. I mean, I've just been scrolling through some of the videos. You've got a lot of stuff there. How did you get a lot of this stuff? Is it because you had it at video? I mean, all of this stuff here is what you had after you left TTT.
Okay, so in 1981, a group of us from TDT, I mean, there were 6 of us, 5 of us were from TDT, and one was a insurance guy who who we appointed as our marketing manager kind of thing. And we left to form a new company because we saw that there was a need for a company that could satisfy the advertising companies who were now producing. Because remember, we came in 1981. So before us, there was AVM, there was Banyan, who had done mostly programming. But as I tell people, before I left TTT, the only ads that I had done were like ad mags. I had never, gone out and shot a commercial and put it together because that TTT didn't do that.
Yeah.
So other companies, so AVM came in, they did a lot of, they filled up a void there because they started in 1978.
Right.
So the same guy who hired me, Brian Waller, remember I told you, the assistant program director.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's another funny story because when Mr. Mohammed came back from vacation, he called all of us into the same boardroom and decided, this is like 2 weeks we're there, right? And decided he's going to test us and had this questionnaire drawn up and everybody had to fill it out. And it was on very technical stuff about television, which we hadn't learned yet.
Oh.
and it was, and he was very, very, what should I say, disrespectful to the people and to Brian, because he turned to Brian and said, Mr. Waller, what kind of nincompoops have you hired here? That's what he said in front of all of us to Brian. So, from that point in time, that didn't endear me to him at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just kept out of his way. But but the guys all did very well. All television is not your normal kind of job.
Yeah.
There were some guys who were treated like that. They can't wait for the 3 o'clock to reach because what happens at 3 o'clock, the new shift comes in and they hand over to the old shift hands over in the hour between 3 and 4, and then at 4 the guys leave.
Yeah.
Right. So but some people would stay and just hang around, or because we're still learning, right?
Yeah.
And I was one of those. I always hung around. So
yeah.
And I became well, I have to mention here that the guy who really taught me how to edit was a guy called Curtis. Curtis was an old Fatima boy. He was a couple of years older before me, and Curtis Wilson, and he was the epitome of a professional person. I mean, like, everything had to be done correctly, and he showed me the proper way. And he saw that I was, interested in editing. By that time, we were on 3/4 inch machines, so we could edit machine to machine. And I just ran with that, and that was when I decided that's what I wanted to do. I mean, out of all the other parts of the business, camera work, audio, master control, telecine, VTR, editing was what I was best at. So I concentrated on that, and so pretty soon I got I was in demand in terms of the producers and directors wanted me to edit their shows.
Yeah.
So I worked for, back in the early days, well, initially it was in sports. So if you remember the World Netball competition,
Yes, when it was hosted here in Trinidad and
when it
Tobago
was
back in
with
1979. Yeah.
Pay as a captain, right?
Right.
We
Yeah. Penny Captain
TT
had that.
broadcast that live, and
Yes.
we set up a edit suite in the truck, and I edited as we went along, and then we did a highlights package which was edited while the day was going on. And we did that for Southern Games for a few years, and the producer of that was a guy called Ozzy Mango, and Victor Daniel was the director. So after that, I was working with Allison. Allison Hennessy had a series two programs called Monday at 6.
I remember Monday at 6. I remember that show
All
very
right.
well.
So I was the editor for all of those.
Right.
And the other one was I can't remember, but so I mean, and those were great programs because I mean they did their research, they had their scripts. You know, I would get a script, and sometimes one of them she worked with another producer called Joy Gould, and sometimes Joy would be sitting with me.
Yes.
And or other times I just give me the script, but it was always a deadline thing. You know what I mean? So most times the show from Monday at 6 would be finished at 5 or 5:30, you know, same Monday. So, but I was quite proud of that work because it was really good information. And actually, I've been trying to find some of those episodes. I found one, but archives-wise, we did not. TDT, when I was working TDT was the only two companies, government companies that was making money was the oil company and TDT.
Wow.
They were the only ones making a profit. Everybody else, you know, telephone company, WASA, BB, everybody was losing money.
Yeah.
And they were just subsidizing because, you know, we were still in our oil boom kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but TDT was actually generating revenue. So, so they had some wiggle room to invest in new equipment and to, but still they were niggly because we, you know, a lot of times we didn't have new tape.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you have to reuse the old tape, and that's where a lot of the archives would have disappeared because they were recorded over. So now my I have since I've started doing some of these old TTT tapes, you know, digitizing them.
Yeah.
You sometimes get real gems at the end of the tape.
Right.
The part that where they stop the new recording and the old recording is still there.
Yeah.
And I found some real gems. I found a piece of a parade.
Yeah.
On one of those tapes.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember seeing that actually.
Michael Boothman.
Right.
Yes.
There we are. There we are.
The piece with Hazel Ward and Peter Minchell.
I remember that too.
Was at the end of a tape. That was actually shot in 1976. The year I got there. So there is still some hope to find some of these nuggets at the end of tapes.
Yeah. So like archaeology, it's just
it's like digging and you know striking a diamond somewhere here and a piece of gold somewhere there.
I think you're doing. I think what you're doing is to be supported. What is it that you need? If somebody were to say, well, Timmy, what do you need to continue this or help with this? What would you need? Is it that visual production is doing it? You know, like your company's just kind of doing it as a side project kind of thing. But
this is my hobby. I mean, I get some I mean, I get my greatest satisfaction from the comments that people leave.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. But I mean,
You know,
if somebody were to offer to help,
I certainly don't get any money. And it's just me. I haven't entrusted this into anybody else's hands. They don't know how to do it. So I mean, and it's now become quite like second nature for me to, to post something, and everything that I post, I have to write something.
Yeah. Timmy, is it sorry for interrupting, Timmy, but is it possible that there is as yet a vast treasure trove of ads and excerpts from local programming that we have not seen as yet that you think still exists, at least in as far as your library is concerned?
Oh yeah, there is tons of stuff. I mean, I got access a few years ago to well, let me go back a bit. Back in 81, right, when we started, one of the positions in our organization was a librarian. So we always had a track of everything we did. Tapes had a number, they had cue sheets in them, there was a description. That was before we had a database, but there was a book. And then when we, the first database we had was on FileMaker Pro on a Mac Classic thing. And we actually continued that up until I left in 2001. So we always had a librarian who dealt with tape and finding tape, because no sense having a librarian, you can't find anything or you can't find it quickly enough.
Well, yes.
So it was, in later years, you just do a search on a computer and you find the number and you go and pull the tape off the shelf. So we always had that. So the Video Associates Library started in 1981, and those tapes were still on the shelf when they closed down in 2016, and I got access to the library and took, I don't want to say, but probably close to 7,000 tapes out of there. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of stuff that you still haven't seen. Yeah.
Wow.
So think about, me digitizing, and I have done,
that's a Herculean effort, though. That is
I've done a few thousand,
Yeah.
Plus, we also have done digitizing for the government, and so I have copies of all their height. So at one point, right after, so I'm going to work in terms of political periods now, okay? So,
all right.
So,
just don't get triggered.
No, just from a point of view of history and time. So the NAR period, we were pneumatic. And right between NAR and when the PNM won in 91, I think it was, they switched to height, which to me was the absolute worst format ever. But, news departments switched to height.
Pneumatic.
Huh?
I couldn't.
Oh yeah, no. Pneumatic was a champion compared to height, because with height you could record an hour, but the tape itself was very, very brittle. I mean, I never, we used height for a short time, and I never reused the height tape because you would be always guaranteed of dropouts,
Yeah.
So, but the government turned to height. So meaning that, you remember, the government shot everything that the prime minister did. Okay, so nothing political, but everything you go and cut a ribbon for a standpipe, they're shooting that, right? So, and all the foreign trips and
sword turning ceremonies.
Yeah, all of that, conferences, some and Parliament, because Parliament was also not live in those days. So every Thursday or Friday, they were in Parliament shooting the proceedings.
Mm.
So they had like a decade of Hyatt archive, and they changed to Betacam somewhere around 99, 2000 or something. Yeah. And we got a job to convert that whole archive of Hyatt tapes.
That's good. That's interesting.
Right. So that battery history I have.
That's good. Interestingly enough, as an aside, I remember there was a question in a meeting, what to do with the pneumatic tape reader. And I'm sitting in this meeting, I have no idea what they're talking about. And the question came up as we rented the pneumatic tape reader for the agency in 1980 something. And that company closed down, and the tape, they never asked back, because the company closed down, they never asked.
That would be Television Enterprises.
Right? And the machine has been sitting there, and I think they still have it there.
They still have it? Oh, well, I want it.
Right. What you could do is you could send a note. You could send a note to Block, how do you name later? You can send a note to say, listen, if you're still having a pneumatic tape player, I would like to take it off your hands, because they didn't know what to do with it.
So
and
it was still.
I left in 2017. It was still sitting down there in the conference room, like
Yeah. No, a lot of agencies had pneumatic players.
Yeah,
because that's what we gave them.
So you put it there so that people can see that you have equipment. But I don't know if it is still there. I don't know if they threw it away. I don't know, but you could ask. You could ask if it's still there. But I found it interesting. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me you were renting this for the last 30 years or 20 years or whatever? And nobody even asked back for the machine. Nobody said anything. It was so funny to think that you were renting a machine for 20 years.
Well,
paying rent for this thing for 20 years,
Well, I mean, they must have stopped paying after a while, right? There was nobody to collect.
Again, when the question of, well, we don't know what to do with this, the company going out of business. I'm like, so who are you paying? Your money is going where?
Exactly.
Don't even want to know. But Timmy, this was an awesome conversation. I think we have learned a lot. John, what do you think? You've learned a lot.
I certainly have. It's helped. I mean, Timmy's input, and not just from what he's said, but in terms of what he's done. I mean. Yeah. It's invaluable to what our history, our visual history anyway, is about. Yeah. I just curious about one thing. If there was one ad that you've been involved in, Timmy, which ad that you've done that really makes you feel proud? Could you name one specific? Or are there?
There's several. I mean, but there are a couple that I can't say one. I mean, the one there's one in Trinidad and there's one in Guyana. I'll tell you about the Guyana one first. So around 1989, 1990, I first met Ernie Ross. And he came to us to fix an ad that he had done at another production house, and he wasn't happy. And I fixed it for him, and he was very happy. And that started a relationship that went for a lot of years. And I'd never been to Guyana, and he had Guyanese clients, and one of them was a bank called GBTI. Now, GBTI was in Georgetown. They had a few branches. It wasn't a big bank. They were subsequently bought by Republic or one of the Trinidad banks.
Yeah, I think it's Republic.
Yeah. But We did an ad. I first time in Guyana, me, my camera, my wife went with me. We stayed at Ernie's house. He had, but what he had was a monster jingle done by Sean Bartholomew. I mean, you know, that a jingle that will bring tears to your eyes, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and
Sean
I
is
just, Sean was the best.
Yeah.
At that time, and Ernie. So it was just a jingle and visuals, and it was just normal Guyanese scenes. I mean, I never seen a horse coming down Main Street, with a drawing a cart, with lumber on it, that kind of those kind of shots,
Right.
and the buildings and the bank itself was beautiful because it was a really old architectural structure, and they had these balconies running around on the first floor. So what we did was we put the whole staff around that, so it's like a circular thing. And apart from shots of them actually doing banking, the chorus was them singing in the balcony, and the camera was just doing a 360 around that. Man, that ad blew away Guyana. I mean, that ad ran for like 25 years.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Staying power, yeah.
I remember being on an airplane going to Miami, and I ended up sitting next to this Indian guy and his wife. So, and we started to talk, and he said he's Guyanese and he lives on Demerara side. And I said, yeah, I've been there. And I just mentioned, the first time I went there, I went to do a commercial for GBTI. And the guy just turned and looked at me, and he said, "You did the GBTI ad?" like he was in shock, I said, yeah. And this was like, I tell you, this was like more than 15 years after the ad was on the air, right?
Right.
And he told me, that ad's still on the air. I said, really? He said that it was like a nation building thing, because before that, Guyana had never had seen themselves in that kind of way. So, they thought it was some Hollywood film crew came and shot this thing, because it looked so different to what they were accustomed to, and it was them, And that ad had if you ask any Guyanese person of a certain age about that ad, they will remember it, because it had
such. Do you have a copy of that ad on your channel? Is there a copy of that ad?
Yeah, there should be.
Point our listeners to that ad. I could probably put a link to it. If you drop a link for me in the
no, you can just do a search, go in the commercial playlist and just put in GBTI, and it should come up. Yeah, I'm sure I posted that.
We put in links so that everybody can see it. I want to see it because it sounds awesome. It sounds like that BB ad that we were talking about the other day, John.
You mean the Truly Yours one?
Yeah.
Truly Yours,
that you see, you're right. People see it, and you become proud of it because it taps into something patriotic, something into
the thing was it was an anthem. Yeah. Sean Bartholomew did a fantastic job with that jingle. And even now, if I hear it, tears might come to my eyes, So it's
that's good. That's good.
And and after that ad, Ernie, Jesus Christ, I mean, I went all over the Caribbean with Ernie, and he only wanted me to shoot.
Yeah.
And we went everywhere because he had a lot of Caribbean. He specialized in banks, actually.
Yeah.
So he had banks in almost every territory. And I had to kind of wean him off of me because I had to shoot and edit all this stuff. And so I used to, carry, I always would have assistants in the crew, and started to let them shoot. And the first time he said, "What are you doing? Why are you on the camera?" I say, no, this is a simple shot. You get it. And I kind of weaned him off until he was comfortable with other people, and I got out of that. But we did a lot of work together.
That's great. That's great.
Going straight up to when I left. I mean, and a lot of things, a lot of big part of our work and portfolio, which you probably wouldn't see much of in the YouTube channel, political campaigns.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I worked on first political campaign we worked on was with the late Lloyd Carter for Grenada elections back in the early 80s. And then I worked with Roy Boyk for the elections in Bermuda, was it? He was handling the campaign for the guy who got in and spent like 3 terms there.
Yeah.
And then we started working for Guyana. So when Burnham died and Hoyt took over, their party came to us to do the campaign because they were going to have an election against, it was against Janet Jagan at the time. And Hoyt came and he stayed in Trinidad, and we shot a series of testimonials and commercials in Caribbean Sound Basin. We rented some space there and we shot Hoyt there. He won the election. And then the next election was early 90s. And that's when Ross got involved. And we worked for, actually, we worked for both parties because I was like the AE for Hoyt, and I had to give my production manager, and we used separate crews. So he was working for the PPP, and we did both campaigns. Nobody ever saw, in our business, as you know, confidentiality is key, right? So once you lose that, kind of, if people don't trust you, so that's because he was so confident. He never knew what the other party was doing, and they never knew what he was doing. So that worked out. And then we did elections in Antigua, St. Lucia, then Guyana again. And in fact, when I left Video Associates in 2001, it was to do the, because there was going to be an election in 2001, and the guy, the client came and said, well, we want to do the campaign and want Video Associates to do it. I said, well, you have to do it without me because I'm leaving. And he said, where are you going? I said, forming a new company. He said, well, we're going with you. So I knew that I had a big job lined up, when I left.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of them. I had kind of planned my leaving carefully. So, and and since then we've done, what else? We've done other Guyanese elections. We've done, and a lot of, we were part of every single Trinidad election.
Okay.
Working both for PNM and for the UNC.
Mm-hmm.
When Pandey won, we did that campaign. If you remember, there were 2 characters. They actually hired a foreign team from Texas to come and do the reshoots, and they wrote the spots. I'm trying to remember the 2 characters who were, like, one was a PNM and one was a UNC, and they used to be arguing all the time. I don't know if you remember that campaign.
Husband and wife.
Husband and wife, yeah. Clifford Lemon was one.
Keith and Daphne. The
Keith and Daphne, yeah, that's it.
1995. Yeah.
It's, so I mean, we actually didn't. We did all the support for it, but the guy, very talented guy, he actually shot it. We set up we did all the pre-production and assistant work and equipment, and they actually they edited it back in the States and sent it back.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the others, the PNM ones, we did all on our own. So the last election that I was involved in was probably 2010. And that was not a creative exercise. That was just to cover all Mr. Manning's meetings in all parts of Trinidad and Tobago. So, I was able to witness that defeat firsthand.
All right, Timmy, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I think we've gone. Usually try to keep this for a kind of period of time, but this is interesting, so I kind of let it go. But we would love to have you come back again.
Yeah, well, lots more stories.
Yeah,
lots more stories, and you didn't even ask about the quicksand.
Yeah, we didn't. No, we didn't. But, what I would like to do is I would definitely like to bring you back on to talk about the quicksand, yeah. But I mean specifically what Jared and I talked about previously is that we wanted to talk to you eventually, not today, but eventually. We want to talk about more about producers, about ad and Guyana, the political ads, for example, producing and developing those ads, as well as providing what is called the resource for local people to build their own content. Because now everything is about content, online content. Everybody's shooting video. One of the main bugbears we have together is a lot of people just pick up a camera and just start shooting. There's not a lot of nuance, there's not a lot of
it's not. I mean, you work for agencies, right? Ads don't just happen. Ads conceived and then hammered over the head and refined, and before it comes to somebody like us on the script.
So the development something like the quicksand, we wanted to go through the process. I remember when we were told this is what we need to shoot, and we talk about it. But we could do that at a later time. We have a couple more episodes of this season before we take a break. I want to take a break for the Christmas, maybe. But definitely bring you back, and we could talk a little bit more about building ads in Trinidad, because I always have said Trinidad's advertising industry was at the forefront, was at the pinnacle. We were.
That goes without saying. Goes without saying. That's why companies like us used to go to the other countries to shoot ads, because they didn't have the capabilities.
Exactly. And also, we want to talk about moving forward, what's going to happen in the future. What do you think is the future of doing not just TV ads, but visual communications on the whole, the whole idea of editing and putting together something now. You could do like Ralph Bakshi, the animator, said, well, you could do it in a box. You could do it in a box in your house. You don't need a studio or anything anymore.
No, you're doing it on your phone. You're shooting and editing on your phone. So it's a whole different game now.
We still need to know where we've come from. We still need to get inspiration from somewhere, which is why it's always good to see the stuff that you have in your channel. I mean, when we saw the quicksand and when we saw the other things on your channel, and I also wanted to mention before I forget that I would always say that Fireflight White Horse video is always one of my favorites. Always. I didn't know the song. I just remember the video. And I also know it's Small World because we're all Fatima boys. I also with Sean Eskai. So Sean Eskai, our contemporary. So Sean's dad, I know Sean's dad. So it's a very small world.
Well, sure. Sean used to work for me.
Right, exactly. So it's very small world. And the thing is that we want to say, I don't remember the music, but I do remember the video.
Well, I'll tell you the other ad that you asked me about, memorable ads that the other ad I would say would have been the Dumore ad.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. We'll talk about that. So
that was probably the most expensive production we had done up to that time.
I think I remember that.
Hey, Dumore. Yeah.
Hey, Dumore. I remember that.
Yeah. Yes. All right, Timmy. Well, thank you very so much.
Thank you so much.
I usually do. I don't know if you've listened to the whole of one of our episodes, but what we usually do at the end of it is we kind of look for one of the key words of this show. I don't know, Jar, what do you think the keyword of this show is? Archiving. Can we say archiving?
I think we
Archiving.
could, yes.
What is
Archiving.
archiving? What is archiving?
Well, you see, archiving is taking stuff that happened through the years and chronicling it in such a way that,
okay, but what is archiving really provoking? Not memory?
Okay, we could use memory.
Yeah, not memory. But that's not important right now.
That's not important right now, Timmy.
But it will be. It will be.
It will be. This episode is, you hear this episode on the Monday. We recorded this on the Wednesday.
I just send me a heads up so I know.
Don't worry.
In fact, I don't need to listen to it again. I mean,
that's fine.
but I could send the link to other people who may want to.
Yeah. What I do is I publish it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and then a week later I try to. I've been not so good with it, but I've been trying to upload the episode 1 week after for YouTube, because there are people on the Apple Podcasts who prefer Apple Podcasts, and there are people who prefer the YouTube. I'm like, look, guys, I can't please everybody. So what I'll do is I'll put it out there on the podcast first so that people can listen to it at their leisure. And then I will put it with some video onto the YouTube channel so that at least they'll have something. The YouTube people can also get it,
Right.
Yeah. So what I'll do,
all right, and tell people to subscribe to the channel. I think it's a valuable resource. There's nothing else like it that I see.
No question.
Yeah.
And it's only going to, let's see, there's a lot of tapes still to digitize.
Well, we hope that you get through some before the end of the world.
Actually, I posted some old commercials. I don't know if you saw them in the last 48 hours.
I did see that. All right.
Wow, really? We'll take a look at that.
Yeah. All right, Kelly. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks a lot to all our listeners. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you later.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.